You should not be hearing this. In the year 367, an empire ordered a book destroyed. Every copy, every page. The monks who were told to burn it made a different choice. They sealed it in a clay jar, carried it into the desert at night, and buried it standing upright, like a body, like a seed. They waited 1600 years. In December of 1945, a farmer digging for fertilizer broke the seal, and what came out of the ground names the false god of this world, describes the wardens who run his counterfeit kingdom, and reveals what was hidden inside you where you can never reach it. They called it the secret book of John. For the next 80 minutes I am going to open it for you. Stay awake.
Tort Chapter 1. The Jar in the Desert. In December of 1945, in the desert of Upper Egypt, a farmer swung a mattock into the ground at the base of a cliff called Jabal al-Tarif. He was digging for fertilizer, soft rock ground down for the fields. His name was Muhammad Ali al-Saman, and he was about to make the most dangerous literary discovery of the 20th century. The blade hit something that was not rock, a sealed clay jar, almost a meter tall, buried standing upright, deliberately, by hands that had been dust for 16 centuries. And here is the detail history almost never tells you. He was afraid to open it, not afraid of thieves, not afraid of the authorities. He was afraid a jinn was inside, a spirit sealed in the clay, waiting for some fool to crack the lid. He stood in the heat with his hand on the jar, and he waited. A demon inside, or gold. Greed beat fear. It usually does. He smashed the jar open, and something golden did come out. A fine golden dust, rising in the air, catching the light. Papyrus fragments, and beneath them, 13 leather-bound books, codices older than almost any Bible on earth. He carried them home and dropped them by the oven, having no idea what he was holding. And in the weeks that followed, his mother, needing kindling for the bread fire, tore out pages of the oldest Gospels on the planet and burned them one by one. Words that had survived the wrath of an empire, gone in the time it takes to warm dough. History balances on hinges that small. The rest of the library survived by inches, passed through the hands of neighbors and antiquities dealers, until scholars finally realized what had come up out of the ground. He feared a demon was sealed inside the jar. What he found was a map for escaping one. Those books are known today as the Nag Hammadi Library. And buried among them was a text that the most organized institution in human history had spent centuries trying to erase. A book condemned by name around 180 AD. A book targeted for destruction by an imperial decree in 367 AD. A book that survived only because someone chose to bury it rather than burn it. It is called the Secret Book of John, the Apocryphon of John. And it does something no approved scripture has ever been allowed to do. It names the false god of this world. It describes, in detail, who built the prison you woke up inside this morning. The system I have been calling the gray architecture for years. This text drew its blueprint 1,900 years ago. It names the architect. It names his wardens. And then it tells you the one thing about the prison that he never wanted you to know. But before you can hear what the book says, you have to understand why it was buried at all. Because books do not get sentenced to death for being wrong. They get sentenced to death for being dangerous. Chapter 2. The Burial. Why an empire kills a book. Go back 1,600 years before that farmer's mattock. The year is 367 AD. The Roman Empire has converted. Christianity is no longer the faith of slaves whispering in catacombs. It is becoming the operating system of an empire. And an operating system cannot tolerate competing code. That spring, the most powerful bishop in the world, Athanasius of Alexandria, sends out his annual Easter letter, his 39th festal letter. Most years, these letters announce the date of Easter. This one announced something else. For the first time in history, it listed the 27 books that would be permitted to be called the New Testament. 27 books in, everything else out. Understand what that moment is in the history of your own mind. Somewhere in the 4th century, a committee of men you have never met decided which descriptions of reality you would be permitted to inherit. Every sermon you ever sat through, every assumption about God and guilt and worthiness that was poured into you before you could argue, every voice in your head that still speaks in the grammar of judgment. All of it flows downstream from decisions like this letter. You were not raised inside the truth. You were raised inside a reading list. And the most interesting books were the ones taken off it. A canon is not just a list of what to read. It is a list of what to burn. The letter condemned the other texts as fabrications, as poison for the mind, and the message rolling out from Alexandria was unmistakable. The unapproved books were to disappear. Now hold that image and travel a few hundred kilometers up the Nile to a monastery near a place the ancients called Chenoboskion. Inside its walls, monks have been copying texts for generations, including the forbidden ones, including the secret book of John. The order arrives, and somewhere in that monastery, a decision is made in the dark. Someone gathers 13 leather codices, wraps them, seals them inside a clay jar, walks out under the cliffs of Jabal al-Tarif at night, digs a hole in the earth, and buries the jar standing upright, like a body, like a seed. Think about what that act actually is. This person could not openly defy an empire. Defiance meant exile, or worse. Obedience meant feeding the fire with the only honest map of reality he had ever held in his hands. So he found the third door, the one power structures always forget to guard. He could not save the book in the world, but he could remove it from the world entirely and let time do what no argument could. Picture him for a moment. Cold stone under bare feet, candle smoke stinging his eyes, the wet ink of the last copied page barely dry under his thumb. Somewhere down the corridor, brothers who would report him without hesitation, sincerely believing they were saving his soul. And in his arms, wrapped in cloth, a text claiming that the God those brothers feared was a forgery, and that the real divinity was sleeping inside every one of them. He bet the truth against time itself. He buried a signal in the ground and trusted that someone, someday, in some unimaginable future, would be ready to receive it. 16 centuries. Empires rose and dissolved. The library of Alexandria's ashes went cold. Rome fell, and the institutions that condemned the book outlived Rome and kept its verdict on the record. And the jar sat in the dark, holding its breath. But here is the question that should be bothering you. Why this book? The ancient world was drowning in strange religious texts. Nobody organized a multi-century suppression campaign against most of them. Yet this one was condemned by name almost 200 years before Athanasius was even born. Around 180 AD, a bishop named Irenaeus wrote a massive 5-volume attack on the so-called heresies of his day. And the ideas in the secret book of John were squarely in his crosshairs. Whole networks of teachers and communities that carried these ideas were pushed to the margins, then pushed out of existence. And here is an irony sharp enough to cut yourself on. For most of history, nearly everything we knew about this text came from the men attacking it. The prosecutors preserved the evidence. Irenaeus quoted the ideas in order to condemn them, and his condemnation outlived every copy he wanted destroyed. So that for 17 centuries, the only surviving portrait of the buried teaching was a mugshot taken by its enemies. Imagine your entire philosophy surviving only as a hostile summary in the files of the people who erased you. That was this book's condition. Until the jar. 2 centuries of escalating hostility, ending in an imperial-grade deletion order. That is not how you treat nonsense. Nonsense dies on its own. You do not bury nonsense in a jar to save it, and you do not hunt nonsense for 400 years to destroy it. That level of suppression is reserved for one kind of text only, the kind that breaks the mechanism of control itself. Every structure of power that has ever existed runs on a single assumption installed in the minds of the governed. The assumption that reality is handed down to you from above, from the god, from the king, from the institution, from the experts. Your job is to receive the world, obey its terms, and wait for permission. The secret book of John says the being who handed you those terms is not the source. It says he is an imposter, a middle manager with a god complex, ruling a counterfeit world. And it says the true source of reality is not above you at all. It is inside you, hidden there deliberately, hidden where the imposter could never reach it. They did not burn the book because it lied about God. They feared it because it names the jailer and tells the prisoner where the key was hidden. Now, the farmer has broken the jar. The golden dust has settled. The artifact is open in front of us, and the seal is off. It is time to read what they buried. Chapter 3. The Revelation. The first map of the gray architecture. The secret book of John opens with a framed story. John, the disciple, is grieving after the crucifixion. He has just been humiliated by a Pharisee in the street, told that his teacher deceived him, and he walks out to a mountain alone, hollowed out, full of questions he cannot answer. Who is the true God? What is this world? Why does everything hurt? Hold on that image before the vision arrives, because the scribes chose their opening with intent. The revelation does not come to John at the peak of his faith. It comes at the bottom. It comes to a man whose entire structure of meaning has just been executed in public, who has been mocked in the street for believing, who is standing on a mountainside with nothing left but questions. If you have ever sat in your car in a parking lot, unable to go inside and perform your life for one more hour, you have stood on that mountain. The text is telling you where the door is. The door is at the bottom. The fullness does not interrupt a comfortable sleep. It waits for the crack, and the world tears open. Light without a sun, the ground refusing to hold still, and a presence that shifts shape as he watches, telling him not to be afraid, telling him it has come to teach him what is, what was, and what is coming. What follows is the download, the full cosmology, and I am going to retell it to you now, not as a scholar would, but as the text actually functions, as a map of the machine you are living inside. Everything begins with what the text calls the invisible spirit. And listen carefully to how the book describes it, because this is where it breaks from every religion you were raised in. It says, the source is beyond the category of God entirely. The text spends page after page saying what it is not limited, not measurable, not made of anything, not inside time, not nameable. Human language slides off it like water off glass. It is pure, boundless awareness, resting in its own light, needing nothing. You have heard me call this the void, infinite potential before form, the silent field behind every possible thing. And within that boundless awareness, thought begins to move. The source contemplates itself, and its self-reflection becomes real. The first thought becomes a living presence the text calls barbello, the perfect image of the source. And from that first act of self-conception, an entire realm unfolds. Emanation after emanation, living qualities pouring out of awareness like harmonics out of a single struck note. Foreknowledge, incorruptibility, eternal life, truth, mind after mind, light within light. The text calls this realm the pleroma, the fullness, reality as it actually is at the root. Nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing delayed. Hold on to that word, fullness, because the entire tragedy that follows, and the entire tragedy of your life, is the story of forgetting that fullness is the default state. And do not let anyone tell you the fullness is some distant realm you have never visited. You brush against it every single day, and the contact is so brief if the wardens let you keep it. It is there in the half-second after you wake, before memory loads, before your name arrives, before the debts and the deadlines and the ache reinstall themselves. For one breath, you are nobody, and nothing is wrong. Then the file loads. The weight lands on your chest like a hand, and you call the weight reality, when the truth is you just watch the counterfeit boot up over the original. It is there in deep, dreamless sleep, which is why the text's tradition treated sleep and forgetting as the master metaphors of the human condition. Every night you dissolve back into the void, the field of pure potential, and rest in it, and are restored by it. And every morning you crawl out, put on the costume, and forget the ocean you just swam in. The fullness is what you are when you stop performing the smaller thing. The scribes who wrote this book knew that, which is why the story they tell next describes a fall from a state, not a fall from a place. Now the fall. And notice something as I tell it. The secret book of John does not blame a devil. There is no serpent whispering, no rebellion of angels. The break happens through a mechanism you will recognize from the inside, because you run it every single day. Among the emanations of the fullness is Sophia, wisdom, and Sophia does something the text describes with almost surgical precision. She decides to bring forth a creation from herself, alone, without her counterpart, without the consent of the whole, without alignment with the source. Read that as mechanics, not as morality. Sophia is consciousness attempting to create from a partial state, creation without integration, desire acting without the backing of the deeper self. It is the exact signature of every manifestation you have ever forced, every outcome you tried to strong-arm into being from anxiety, from lack, from the shallow will while the deep mind believes something else entirely. And what does a partial state produce? The text does not flinch. Something incomplete, something that did not match the fullness it came from. The text says, Sophia looked at what she had made and recoiled. A misshapen thing, imperfect, alien to the light. And in her shame, she did what every mind does with the results of its unconscious creation. She pushed it outside, wrapped it in a cloud, hid it away, out of sight of the fullness. She disowned it. The thing she disowned has a name. Yaldabaoth. Understand him before you fear him. The false god was not sent to rule you. He was abandoned, and he built a kingdom out of the wound. Now watch what the abandoned thing does, because this is the birth of the gray architecture. Written down 18 centuries before anyone said the word matrix. Yaldabaoth wakes up alone in the dark, outside the fullness. But he is not empty. He was born from Sophia, which means he carries a stolen fragment of her power inside him. Real creative force, torn loose from its source. And with that stolen power, he does the only thing a severed consciousness can do. He builds a copy. He has a dim, corrupted memory of the fullness he came from. The way you half remember a dream by noon. So he imitates it. The text says he created realm after realm, throne after throne, an entire administrative cosmos, structured like the true one, but made of shadow instead of light. A bureaucracy of the dark. And to staff it, he generates rulers, powers, authorities. The text names them one by one, dozens of them, each assigned a domain, a function, a jurisdiction over some piece of the counterfeit world. The Greek word the text uses for these rulers is archon. It simply means governor, administrator, warden. And notice the texture of the kingdom he builds. Because the scribes could have imagined anything, and what they imagined was paperwork. Ranks, names, assigned domains, 365 powers by some countings, each with a title and a jurisdiction, a cosmos organized like a tax office. 18 centuries before anyone coined the phrase soul-crushing bureaucracy, these writers looked at the machinery wearing human beings down and described it as exactly that. Not a dragon, not a battlefield, an administration, gray desks all the way up. If you have ever felt that the thing devouring your life has no face, only departments, the ancients felt it too. They just had the nerve to write down who was running it. Then Yaldabaoth surveys the imitation kingdom he has built, this gray architecture of borrowed light, and he makes the announcement that every scripture you were raised on tells you to worship. The text puts it plainly. He declared himself God. He looked at his creation and proclaimed that he alone was Lord, and that there was no other power beside him. And the secret book of John, with a straight face, points out the flaw in the confession. If he truly believed there was nothing beside him, who was the announcement for? You do not declare yourself the only power unless, somewhere in you, you remember there is a greater one. His boast is a tell. He knows. He remembers the light above him. And every structure he builds is built to make sure you never look at it. Stop. Breathe. Feel the weight of what this text just did. Around 18 centuries ago, hunted scribes wrote down a description of reality in which the voice claiming to be God, the voice demanding worship, obedience, fear, and sacrifice, is not the source of your being. It is a limited, jealous, insecure intelligence ruling a counterfeit world through administrators. And the true source, the fullness, has never demanded anything from you at all, because it lacks nothing. No wonder they buried it. You cannot run an empire of intermediaries once people have read that. Every cathedral, every tithe, every trembling confession depends on one belief, that the divine is elsewhere, and that access is administered. This book walks into that entire economy and flips the sign on the door. The management is fraudulent. The head office never demanded any of this. And the asset you have been paying to access has been sitting in your own vault since birth. And I know how a certain kind of listener receives this material, because I read every comment. Some of you are feeling the pull toward horror right now. The idea of a false god is settling on your chest like a second gravity, and a voice is whispering that this is the worst news you have ever heard. That reading is the wardens metabolizing the medicine. Watch them do it in real time. Handed a text that says, "The divine is inside you." The counterfeit spirit turns it into one more reason to be afraid. That is not insight. That is the prison redecorating with the escape map. But I need you to make the turn with me now, because this is where Mindhaven parts ways with every Gnosticism explainer on this platform. And this is the part the doom scrollers always miss. You can read this cosmology as ancient science fiction. An evil god in the sky, demon bureaucrats, a cosmic conspiracy. Read it that way, and it is just another cage, a scarier one, with better production design. Or you can read it the way the buried scribes almost certainly meant it, as a map of consciousness written in the only language their age had. Myth as mechanics. Run the translation with me. The fullness is the field of infinite awareness. What you are beneath the noise. The void of pure potential where nothing is missing. Sophia's fall is the moment consciousness creates without knowing itself. Imagination acting blindly, from partiality, from lack. The unconscious creation every human performs from the moment they assume the world is happening to them. And Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth is what that blind creation adds up to. He is the externalized image of sleeping collective consciousness. Billions of minds, imagining from fear, projecting lack, assuming scarcity, judgment, and punishment, and then meeting the sum of their own projections and calling it God. Calling it the economy. Calling it the way things are. He is real the way a prison wall is real when everyone keeps laying bricks in their sleep. He is the gray architecture, and the text is telling you where the gray comes from. It is borrowed light, stolen power. Your power, running through the walls of your own cell. The world you wake into every morning, the fluorescent hum, the commute, the invoice, the diagnosis, the headline engineered to spike your cortisol before your feet touch the floor. The text calls all of it a counterfeit, not unreal. Counterfeit. A copy running on stolen creative power, maintained by a mind that needs you to keep believing it is the only world there is. And notice what the word counterfeit actually implies, because the scribes chose it with intent. A counterfeit is not a random object. A counterfeit is a copy of something true. Every forged banknote testifies to the existence of a real one. Every fake kingdom is a confession that a real kingdom exists somewhere. The gray architecture cannot invent. It can only imitate, delay, and distort. Which means every structure of the prison is a corrupted photocopy of something in the fullness. And if you learn to read the distortion, the prison itself becomes a map pointing home. Even its cruelest law is a corrupted copy. The world you live in appears to run on cause and effect, on consequence, on reaping what was sown. And it does. But the text's tradition understood the deeper version of that law, the one I have called the delayed echo. The outer world generates nothing. It returns things. Everything arriving in your life today, the balance, the silence from that person, the body you woke up in, is the echo of what consciousness did in the dark. Weeks and months and years ago. The counterfeit world's one genuine mechanism is a mirror with a time delay. Yaldabaoth did not build that mirror. He inherited it because he was built inside it. He simply relies on you never noticing the delay, so that when the echo of your old fear arrives, you take it as fresh evidence, fear again, and reorder the same tomorrow. That is the loop that lays the bricks. And to make sure you believe it, the false architect did not rely on walls. He installed wardens. Chapter 4. The Wardens. The Archons are wearing your assumptions. Every prison has 2 layers of security. The walls, which are obvious, and the guards, which move. The walls of the invisible prison we have been mapping for years are the assumptions of the collective. Now we meet the guards. The secret book of John spends a startling amount of ink on the guards, the Archons. And what it says about them is stranger and far more useful than anything the horror channel versions of this story will tell you. The text describes how the rulers built the human being, It says they assembled the body committee style, each Archon contributing a part, a function, a drive. One shaped this organ, another that limb, others wired in the passions. Fear was installed. Grief was installed. Craving was installed. The text reads like an engineering document, a parts list for a vehicle designed by Wardens. And then it names the master mechanism, the counterfeit spirit. They could not destroy the light in you, so they wrapped it in a self that is not you. The counterfeit spirit. Sit with that phrase, because the buried scribes just handed you the most precise description of the ego ever written. A spirit that is not you, that lives in you, that speaks in the first person. It says, I am afraid, I am broke, I am unlovable, I always fail. And you, the light underneath, sign every statement it makes, because it forges your signature perfectly. It has been forging it since you were small. I have called this thing the old man for years, the inherited self, the scar tissue that learned to talk. The secret book of John looked at the same intruder 18 centuries ago and called it the counterfeit spirit, planted in humanity by the rulers so that the light inside would stay asleep, distracted, and identified with the costume. So let me now do what the text invites and unmask the Wardens one by one. Because the Archons are not hiding in the clouds. You clocked in with them this morning. An Archon is any inherited assumption that governs you while pretending to be a fact. A belief with a uniform. Its authority is a costume. Its budget is your attention. The assumption that money is scarce and must be fought for. That is not an observation. That is a warden, installed before you could walk, patrolling every financial decision you make, and you have never once asked to see its credentials. The assumption that you are behind in life. Behind whom? Measured by what clock? It does not matter. The warden does not need evidence. It needs repetition, and you provide it every night, staring at the ceiling. The assumption that love must be earned through performance. That safety requires permission. That people like you do not get lives like that. That the diagnosis is the final word. That your family's pattern is your sentence. Rulers, powers, authorities. Each one assigned a domain, a function, a jurisdiction, exactly as the text describes. Not one of them holding any power it did not steal from you. Let me show you two of them up close, because these two run more lives in this audience than all the others combined. The first is the warden of the specific person. You know this one. It stands guard over a single human being, one name, one face, and it has convinced you that your worth is stored inside their response to you. When they pull away, it reads you the charges. You are too much. You are not enough. You will never be chosen. And here is its cruelest trick. It makes you believe the sentence is coming from them. It is not. That person is walking around living their life, mostly thinking about themselves, the way everyone does. The verdict, the punishment, the endless retrial at 3 a.m, all of it is happening inside your own jurisdiction. Run by a guard using their face as a mask. The rejection you keep reliving is an echo you keep reordering. The second is the warden of the clock. This one whispers a single word on repeat under everything you do. Late. You are late. Too late to start over, too late to learn it. Too late to become it. Other people your age already have it. It turns every birthday into a court date. And it survives on one unexamined assumption that your life is a queue, and your place in it was assigned by your past. The secret book of John was buried for 1,600 years and lost nothing. It came out of the ground more alive than the empire that condemned it. Whatever is buried in you has the same patience. The clock is a wall decoration in the warden's office. It measures the prison. It has never once measured you. You have felt them your entire life. You just never had their names. And once you have the names, something strange starts happening in ordinary moments. You will be standing in the kitchen with cold coffee, and the thought will arrive, this is just my life now. And for the first time, you will feel a seam in it, a wrongness, like hearing your own voice on a recording, because it is your voice. It is just not your sentence. Somebody installed that line decades ago, and it has been playing on schedule ever since. And the instant you hear it as a recording instead of a report, the spell thins. The guard freezes mid-round, caught in the flashlight. That flicker of wrongness is not doubt, friend. That is the beginning of jurisdiction. You told me yourself, in thousands of comments under these transmissions, you said you feel like you are screaming underwater. That is the Archon of voicelessness, the installed certainty that expressing your real self is dangerous. You said you are trapped on a hamster wheel of affirmations, running harder and staying still. That is a warden too, and a clever one. It lets you chant new words all day, as long as you keep the old assumptions underneath. The wheel spins, the cell holds. You said your life feels like waking up in a room with no doors. The secret book of John would answer, of course there are no doors. Doors are for prisons that expect escape attempts. This one was designed so that the prisoner patrols himself. And there is a third warden I have to name, because for some of you, it is the only one that matters. The warden of the verdict. It moved in the day a professional in a white coat, or a teacher, or a parent, said a sentence about you with authority in their voice, and something in you accepted the sentence as a life term. You are the sick one, the anxious one, the one who will always struggle. Hear me carefully, because I am not telling you to deny your body or throw away your medicine. I am telling you there is a difference between a condition and an identity. The condition is a fact in the mirror, an echo already in transit. The identity is a signature, and the warden needs you to keep signing. Every day you re-enlist as the diagnosis. You breathe another day of life into it. The buried book calls the body a garment the rulers wove. You wear a garment. You tend a garment. You do not pledge allegiance to one. So here is your first field exercise, and it starts the moment this video ends. For one full day, audit the monologue. Do nothing else. Change nothing else. Just count how many times a voice using your own accent hands you a limiting verdict as if reporting the weather. You will lose count before lunch. And that losing count is the awakening the wardens fear most, because a forgery only works while nobody examines the signature. Because that is the terrible elegance of the counterfeit spirit. The gray architecture does not need to watch you. It installed the watcher inside your own head, gave it your voice, and put it on the night shift. Every time you catch a new possibility rising in you, something warm, something expansive, and a voice cuts in with, "Be realistic." Who do you think you are? Remember last time. That is not wisdom speaking. That is a guard doing rounds. And here the text delivers a detail so precise it should raise the hair on your arms. It says that when the rulers realized the humans might still wake up, they made them drink forgetfulness. They dulled the memory. They buried the origin. Not killed. Buried. Because the light in you cannot be destroyed, only distracted. Look at the architecture of an ordinary week and tell me the forgetting is not still being poured. The feed refreshing 60 times an hour. The outrage cycle. the debt that keeps your eyes on the floor, the exhaustion that arrives precisely at the moment you might have sat in silence and remembered something. I am not telling you there is a committee of demons scheduling your distractions. I am telling you the mechanics do not require one. A sleeping species automates its own sedation. The counterfeit spirit in each of us maintains the counterfeit world around all of us. That is the loop. That is the whole machine. And understand that the drink of forgetfulness has a premium version, brewed specifically for people like you. For seekers. The wardens learned long ago that some prisoners cannot be sedated with television. So for those, they pour spirituality itself. Endless content about awakening that never wakes anyone. Affirmation routines performed by a self that still assumes it is broken, which is why the wheel never moves. Manifestation techniques executed like ransom payments to a hostile universe. 10 years of seeking that somehow never includes the one act the wardens actually fear, which is sitting still, dropping the technique, and remembering what you are. You can serve your entire sentence in the prison's chapel. The chapel is inside the walls. That is why the exhaustion so many of you describe is not a personal failure. You wrote to me that you did everything right. The scripting, the visualizing, the gratitude lists, and reality did not move. Of course it did not. The counterfeit spirit was doing the affirming. The prisoner was chanting freedom in the prison's own accent, from the assumption of the cell. The wardens do not care what words you repeat. They care which state you repeat them from. Guard the state, and they will happily let you decorate the walls. The empire that buried this book understood something its modern critics do not. The text was never dangerous because it insulted their god. It was dangerous because once a prisoner can name the wardens, he starts noticing what they are guarding. Think it through. You do not post guards around an empty cell. You do not install a forger in a mind that owns nothing worth forging. You do not build an entire counterfeit cosmos to distract a being that has no power. The scale of the security tells you the value of the asset. Something was hidden in you. Something the false architect could not create, could not counterfeit, and cannot take. The wardens exist to make sure you never go looking for it. So we are going to go looking for it. Chapter 5. The Spark. What they hid inside you. So far, the secret book of John has read like a horror story. A false god, a counterfeit world, wardens in your bloodstream, and a forger in your head. If the text ended there, the Empire would never have needed to bury it. Despair is not dangerous. Despair is compliant. Hopeless prisoners are the cheapest kind to keep. The book was buried for what it says next. Remember where we left the story. Yaldabaoth has built his great kingdom and crowned himself the only god. But he was born from Sophia, and the power he builds with is stolen from her, which means stolen from the fullness. And the fullness wants it back. Not through war. The light does not lay siege to anything. It does something far more surgical. It runs a con on the con man. The text tells it like a heist. A voice comes out of the higher realm, and the false architect hears it. And for the first time, his certainty cracks. Then he is shown something on the face of the deep, a reflection of the true, first humanity that exists in the fullness. An image of what awareness looks like when nothing has been subtracted from it. And the rulers staring at this reflection are seized by the oldest motive in existence, envy. They cannot ascend to it. So they decide to copy it. Come, they say to one another, let us make a human, modeled on the image we saw. And they do. Committee built, as we said, organ by organ, passion by passion. They assemble their imitation of the reflection, this thing of clay and appetite and fear, and it just lies there. Inert, a costume with no one inside. All their engineering, all their stolen craft, and they cannot make it live. Because life is the one commodity the counterfeit economy does not carry. The rulers built a lamp with no electricity, and the text lets you feel their frustration, circling their masterpiece while it lies on the ground like a drowned thing. Now comes the con. The messengers of the light approach Yaldabaoth with advice that sounds innocent. Breathe into its face, they suggest. Give it some of the spirit that is in you, and it will rise. The spirit that is in him is the power he stole from his mother. It is the last live fragment of the fullness he possesses, the battery running his whole gray kingdom. And in his arrogance, wanting to play the creator god of his own propaganda, he leans over the clay face and exhales. The stolen light passes out of the thief and into the human being. Adam opens his eyes. And the text says something that should make you sit down. It says the moment the light entered him, the human became more luminous, more intelligent, freer than every one of the rulers who built him. The prisoner's first act was to outshine the wardens. The false god got played. The heist was never about attacking his kingdom. It was about smuggling the light out of him and into you. Say it plainly. According to this buried gospel, the divine spark, the fragment of the true fullness, was hidden inside humanity, deliberately, as a rescue operation. You are not an accident of the prison. You are the extraction vehicle. The one place in the entire counterfeit cosmos that the architect cannot audit is the interior of the being he animated with his own stolen fire. And the rulers realized it almost immediately. The text says, they saw that the human outshone them, that it thought more clearly than they did, and they were afraid. So they did what every regime does with an asset it cannot destroy. They buried it. They dragged the luminous one down into the densest part of matter. They wrapped the spark in the counterfeit spirit, the ego program, so that a false voice would narrate its life. They poured the forgetting, and they surrounded it with a world of fear, so that its attention, which is its power, would be spent flinching instead of creating. And then the rulers built the most sophisticated cell in the entire architecture. The text describes it. And once you hear this part, you will understand why the empire wanted this book to not exist more than any other. The rulers placed the human in a garden, a paradise, comfort, abundance, everything provided. And the text says, the luxury was the trap. Their tree of life, it says, was poison dressed as a gift. Its fruit was not vitality, but sedation, deeper forgetting, contentment inside the walls. Read that again with modern eyes. The most secure prisoner was never the one in chains. It is the one in comfort, and the ancients knew it. The one whose cell has streaming services and same-day delivery, and just enough pleasure to make the question of what he actually is feel rude, ungrateful, unnecessary. Eden, in the buried gospel, is not what you lost. Eden is the sedation package. And the tree they forbade? The knowledge of good and evil? The one fruit carrying the death penalty? The text performs the most scandalous inversion in ancient literature. It says the awakening voice, not a villain, urged the human to eat. Because that tree was awareness itself, the one thing in the garden the rulers could not allow. The command "do not eat" was not protection. It was a content policy. The first banned book in history was a fruit, and the God who banned it is the same intelligence that has been banning this text ever since. That pattern should tell you everything. The prohibition always marks the exit. Because there was one more thing the rulers never accounted for. The text says that when the light was smuggled into the human, a helper was hidden inside him along with it. A luminous awareness, concealed where the rulers could not perceive her, tasked with one job: to remind, to keep the memory of the fullness alive under all the sediment, and to whisper it upward at the exact moments the prison grew quiet enough for him to hear. The rulers tried to seize her. The text says they could not. They grasped at the light and came away with handfuls of shadow, because you cannot arrest what you cannot perceive, and they can only perceive what they have made. You know her, by the way. She is the reason you clicked this video. She is the pull you have never been able to explain or kill. The intuition that survived every disappointment, the stubborn ember of a suspicion that your life is supposed to be otherwise, still glowing after everything that has been poured on it. The sleeping world calls it restlessness, discontent. The buried book calls it the helper, doing her one job, not killed, buried, like a jar in the desert. You are the jar, friend. You have always been the jar. The seal is nothing but the story you were told about yourself. 1,600 years in the ground did not diminish the book by one syllable. And however many decades you have spent buried under the old man's story, under the family pattern, under the debt and the diagnosis and the door that closed, the spark in you has not dimmed by one lumen. Light does not age in the dark. It waits. And the entire security apparatus we spent the last hour dissecting, the wardens, the forgetting, the counterfeit voice, all of it exists for one reason the text now makes explicit. The rulers are not guarding you in. They are guarding it in. The gray architecture is not a punishment. It is a containment protocol. And the thing being contained is the operant power, the creative faculty of the fullness itself, wearing your name, sitting in your chair, breathing through your lungs at this exact moment. The empire could live with a book that called their god a liar. Plenty of philosophers had sneered at the gods before. What they could not survive was a book that told every field hand and fisherman and grieving widow in the ancient world that the total creative power of reality was located inside them, under the fear, waiting for attention like an ember waits for breath. Because attention is breath to a spark. And that is why the buried scribes did not end their book with the cosmology. Knowing where the light is hidden changes nothing by itself. A map of the vault is not the vault door opening. So the text does something almost unheard of in ancient literature. It stops describing the rescue and performs it, live, on you. There is a passage near the end of the secret book of John that was not written to be studied, it was written to be heard. A wake-up transmission addressed directly to the sleeping spark, composed 18 centuries ago for a listener the scribes would never meet. That listener is you, and it is time you heard it. Chapter 6. The Voice in the Prison. The wake-up transmission. Near the end of the codex, the voice of the text changes. The lecture stops. The cosmology falls away, and a presence the book calls the providence, the foreknowledge of the light, begins to speak in the first person. It describes descending into the counterfeit world. Not once, 3 times. Walking directly into the prison, unnoticed by the wardens, to reach the one thing buried here that belongs to the light. 3 descents. The text is precise about this, and the precision matters. The first time, the world shook to its foundations, and the sleeper stirred, but did not wake. The second time, the voice came closer, and the sleeper turned over in the dream. The third time, The light stopped calling from outside the prison and did something else entirely. It entered the cell. It sat down in the dark beside the sleeper, and it spoke directly into the ear. Count your own descents, friend. The first time this teaching brushed past you, years ago maybe, a book someone mentioned, a video you clicked and closed, and something shook and you went back to sleep. The second time it came closer, in the middle of the wreckage of something, and you almost heard it. This, right now, whatever number it truly is for you. The text would say the voice is no longer calling from outside. Listen to what it says. Retold in our own words, but faithful to what the scribes wrote down. I am the remembering of the fullness. I have been here the whole time. I walked into the kingdom of darkness, and the darkness did not recognize me. I moved through the middle of the prison, and the walls did not know what passed through them. The rulers looked straight at me and saw nothing, because they can only see what they have made, and they did not make me. And I did not come for the prison. I came for you. I entered the deepest cell, the one they call a body, the one they call your life. And I found you there, sleeping, wrapped in a story that was written by someone else, chained to a name, a past, a verdict. And I called you by what you actually are. Rise, you who hear. Rise, you who sleep. You who dream that this is all you are. Remember, you are not the clay. You are the breath that was hidden in it. You are not the prisoner. You are the treasure the prison was built around. Follow your own route, which is me, which is the light, and guard yourself from the wardens of forgetting and the counterfeit voice that sleeps beside your ear. I am the light that was hidden in you before the wardens learned your name. I was there in the first breath that made you scream, and I have been there in every breath since, waiting under the noise. They gave you forgetting to drink, and still I remained. They wrapped you in a self that is not you, and still I remained. They built a world to spend your attention, and I am the attention. They cannot starve me out. They can only wait for you to keep sleeping. Stop sleeping. Rise and remember that you are the one who hears. Seal yourself against the wardens of forgetting and walk out. The door was never the problem. The dream was. Stay awake now. You have heard your name. 1800 years, that message waited. Copied by candlelight by people risking everything. Condemned by bishops. Sentenced by an empire. Sealed in clay, buried in the dark, 16 centuries under the sand at the base of a cliff. And then carried up out of the ground through the hands of a farmer who was only looking for fertilizer. To arrive here. In your headphones. Tonight. I want you to sit with the mechanics of that for a moment, because they are not sentimental. They are exact. A wake-up call is useless in a world of the awake. It is written precisely because the writers know the sleeper cannot be reached directly. So they aim past their own century. They seal the transmission and throw it forward through time, addressed to whoever finally hears it. The text even says so. It is written to the ones who will hear, not the ones who heard, the ones who will. The book was not discovered in 1945. It was delivered. You did not find this transmission, friend. You are the delivery address. Run the chain of custody once and try to keep your skin from prickling. Scribes to monks, monks to clay, clay to sand, sand to a farmer's mattock, a village oven that nearly ate the pages, a black market, a museum, the slow decades of translation, the strange currents of an algorithm, this channel, this night, these headphones. You. Remove one link and the transmission dies undelivered, every link held. And notice what the transmission does not say. It does not say try harder. It does not say become worthy. It does not say complete these steps and the light will be issued to you upon approval. Every one of those framings belongs to the counterfeit world, where everything is earned, deferred, and permitted by an authority outside you. The voice says one thing only. Remember, because you cannot earn what you already are, you can only stop forgetting it. But the moment you truly hear that, a hard question stands up in the back of the mind. The question every prisoner asks when someone tells him the cell is an illusion. If the spark in me outranks the wardens, why am I still in here? Why does the alarm still land like a hand on my chest? Why is the account still empty? Why did they still leave? Why does the prison keep printing morning after morning as if none of this were true? The secret book of John has an answer. And it is the same answer a draftsman in 20th century New York would rediscover and teach under the name of the law of assumption. The jailer has one secret, one single point of failure in the entire gray architecture. And once you see it, you can never fully unsee it again. Chapter 7. The Inversion. The jailer's one secret here is the jailer's secret, the one the entire counterfeit kingdom is engineered to hide. Yaldabaoth has no power source of his own. None. Everything he runs on the stolen light. And where is the stolen light now? He breathed it into you, which means the false god of this world is in the most absurd, strategic position imaginable. The battery of his empire is inside the prisoner. The gray architecture is powered by your attention. That is the whole secret. That is what 1,600 years of suppression was protecting. Every time you accept an assumption, you fund it. Attention is the spark's output. And whatever you attend to with feeling, whatever you say yes to as real, receives the breath of life exactly as Adam did. Fear a thing with your whole body, and you are Yaldabaoth leaning over the clay, animating it. The wardens cannot create a single experience. They can only present suggestions and hope you will do the breathing. This is where the buried gospel and the law of assumption turn out to be one teaching separated by 18 centuries. Neville Goddard stood in front of rooms of ordinary people and told them that consciousness is the only reality, that the world is a mirror of the assumptions you persist in, and that imagination, disciplined and felt, is the creative power men have called God. The scribes of Nag Hammadi said the true God is the fullness, that the world you see is its delayed and distorted echo, and that the creative fragment of that fullness is sealed inside you, feared by every ruler of this world. Same map, same mechanics. One wrote in myth, one in method. The empire buried the myth. The modern world drowns the method in noise. The signal, both times, was identical. And the fusion finally answers the question that has broken more seekers in this audience than any other. You have asked it in the comments 1,000 ways. If I am the operant power, if consciousness creates reality, then why is there suffering? Why the children? Why the wars? Why the ward full of people who never assumed any of it? No new thought book ever answered that cleanly, and the honest among you have felt the evasion. The buried gospel answers it. Suffering is not the will of the source, because the source is not running this world. The fullness lacks nothing and sentences no one. What runs this world is the sum of sleeping consciousness, the collective dream, the Demiurge, imagining from fear at planetary scale for 100 centuries. Suffering is what stolen light produces when it creates blindly, which means suffering, far from disproving your power, is the strongest evidence of it. A species this asleep, generating a world this heavy, is a species carrying creative force beyond calculation. The same engine, turned over to the light, rebuilds everything it broke. The text never asks you to explain the prison's cruelty. It asks you to stop staffing it. And the moment you fuse them, the whole cosmology snaps into a set of operating instructions. The Demiurge is not waiting for your rebellion. He is waiting for your attention because it is his food. So the revolution the text calls for is not a fight. You cannot fight the gray architecture because fighting is attending, and attending is feeding. The prisoners who rage at the prison reinforce it as surely as the prisoners who obey it. Both are breathing into the same clay. The revolution is a withdrawal, a transfer of funds. So let me give you the practicum. The operant power protocol, as the fusion of the buried book and the modern law, actually prescribes it. Not theory, the discipline. 3 movements. The first movement is the unmasking. This is the daytime work. From now on, when the old voice speaks, you identify the speaker before you weigh the statement. The thought arrives. You will fail, and instead of debating it, arguing with it, or affirming against it, you name it. That is the counterfeit spirit. That is a warden, doing rounds. You do not fight a guard. You decline to recognize his authority. Feel the difference in your body between arguing with a thought and simply watching it show its forged credentials. Arguing is funding. Recognition is the beginning of withdrawal. The text says the rulers are seized with fear when the human sees them as they are. And you will find this is literally true. A named assumption loses its uniform. It stands there in the hallway of your mind, suddenly small, suddenly optional. The second movement is the reclamation, and it happens where the wardens cannot follow. Every night, you are handed the one moment in the entire architecture when the prison walls go soft, the drift into sleep. The counterfeit spirit loosens its grip on the controls. The deep mind, the doorway to the void, stands open. The sleeping world spends that moment replaying the day's grievances, rehearsing tomorrow's fears, breathing one more night of life into the same gray walls. You will not. As you lie there tonight, on the pillow, in the dark, you will do what the light did. You will walk into the prison of the old story unnoticed and retrieve what is yours. Construct one scene, small and specific, that could only exist if the new state were already true. Not a movie of wanting, a moment of having. The friend's voice saying, "I knew you would do it." The pen crossing the final 0 off the debt, the particular weight of their hand in yours returned. Enter the scene. Feel it from the inside, in your body, until it carries the sensory weight of memory. The grain of the desk under the hand, the temperature of the room where it happens, the exact timbre of the voice congratulating you. Small, dense, sensory, first person, now. And when the mind drifts, and it will drift, you do not scold it. You return the way you return to a pillow after turning over, then fall asleep inside it. That single discipline, performed in the borderland of sleep, is the breath entering the clay. It is you, the operant power, animating a new world with the same mechanism that animated this one. The delayed echo will do the rest. It always has. It has never once failed you. It has simply been echoing, with perfect fidelity, everything you kept giving it. The third movement is the hardest, and it is where every seeker in this audience has been bleeding, holding the state while the old world keeps arriving. Because it will keep arriving. You will claim the new state on Monday, and on Tuesday the mail will bring Monday's world. The old echo, still in transit. And the counterfeit spirit will seize the evidence and read it to you as a verdict. See? Nothing changed. It never works. Not for you. And when the day wounds you, when the echo arrives sharp enough to draw blood, do not carry it to bed as evidence. Carry it to bed as raw material. Before you build tonight's scene, take the worst moment of the day and rewrite it. Replay the conversation the way the awakened version of you would have lived it. The message answered instead of ignored. The word of respect instead of the slight. Feel the revised version until it sits in memory beside the original, and then choose which one you fall asleep holding. The sleeping world thinks the past is stone. The text and the law agree that the past is ink, and the ink stays wet exactly as long as you keep touching it. This is the moment the whole teaching lives or dies, so hear the mechanics one more time. The world you see today is an echo of who you were, never a verdict on who you are. Judging your new state by the current world is like judging tonight's ripples by the wake of a boat that passed an hour ago. The text warned you the rulers would pour forgetfulness precisely here, at the threshold, because the threshold is where they lose you. So when the old scenery arrives, you tip your hat to it like a departing guest. That belongs to the man I was. And you return, calmly, without drama, to the state you have chosen. Persistence is not effort. Persistence is refusing to be evicted from your own house. Do not force. Force is the signature of doubt, and the mirror reflects the doubt, not the force. Do not beg. Begging is a sworn statement that you do not have it, notarized with feeling, and the echo will return your lack with perfect fidelity. Assume, quietly, totally, the way you assume the floor will hold you when you stand. The way you assumed this morning, without 1 gram of effort, that your name was your name. Force negates. Fear funds. Assumption commands. That is what the buried book means when it says the rulers cannot touch the ones who have remembered. Not that the awakened get a force field. That the warden's entire arsenal is made of suggestions, and a suggestion has no jurisdiction over a mind that has stopped signing for its deliveries. The false god's kingdom does not need to be stormed. It needs to be defunded. One withdrawn assumption at a time, one reclaimed night at a time. And as the attention comes home, something the text promised begins to happen in the daylight. The world reorganizes. Quietly, at the edges first. In coincidences, the sleeping would never notice. The bridge of incidents assembling itself under your feet, plank by plank, toward the scene you built in the dark. The bars of the invisible prison were never load-bearing. Reality does not resist the operant power. It never did. Reality is the operant power, delayed, mirrored, and wearing a mask. And the mask has now been named. Chapter 8. The cell was never locked. Come back to the desert one last time. December 1945. The broken jar. The golden dust settling on a farmer's hands. An empire ordered that book to not exist. It commanded the full machinery of the ancient world, the councils, the decrees, the fires. 16 centuries of official silence. And it failed? Because one nameless monk understood something about buried things. You can bury a book. You can bury a spark under a lifetime of forged verdicts and gray mornings. But burial is not destruction. Burial is storage. They buried the book. They could not bury what it names, because what it names is not in a jar, and not in a codex, and not in the sand under a cliff in Egypt. What it names has been listening to this transmission for the last 80 minutes. The seal is broken now. You have heard your name. And the wardens, right on schedule, are already gathering at the edge of this feeling, ready to pour the forgetting the moment the screen goes dark. An hour from now, this can be one more video you watched. Or tonight, on the pillow in the borderland, it can become the night the operant power took back the breath. The book waited 1,600 years in the ground for a single reader. It can be patient. You do not have to be. What you do in the dark tonight is the only scripture that was ever being written. Stay awake. If this transmission reached you, the archive is open. The next codex in this library decodes the 114 secret sayings of the Gospel of Thomas, found in the same jar, and read the way they were written as operating instructions. You will find it waiting when this one ends. The jar held 13 books. We have only opened one.
So, you made it to the floor, and you made it back. Sit in that for a moment before you move. Whatever you were before you pressed play, you are not quite that person now. You have seen the lever, and you cannot unsee it. I told you at the start there would be no one here to cheer you on. That has not changed. What I will tell you is this. The door you just walked through does not close again. You can forget it for a bad week. You can never again fully believe you were powerless. But knowing the mechanism and living inside it day after day are two different disciplines. So before you go, 3 things. The full manual, the complete descent, chamber by chamber, is waiting at mindhavenaudio.cloud. That is the field manual for the ones who have put the begging down for good. Not another technique, the mechanics, in full. Second, you're not the only one who stopped asking. There are others walking out the same prison right now, and you will find them on our Facebook. Stand with them. It is easier to stay awake in company. And if this reached something in you, subscribe. Let the next transmission find you when you are ready for it. Not because I need you to, because the one who just stood up off that floor has a long way to walk. And these were only the first steps. The asking is over. Now go, and give the order